sermon in front of them, I'm not going to share it on screen. But if for some reason you can't get it, let me know and I'll share it on screen.
Thank you very much for agreeing to continue with this. I like this encounter every Monday. I love it. So thank you. So I decided to talk about mothers. I mean, with some kind of humor. You can, Jewish mothers, and hopefully the Jewish mothers that are online can testify, are a great source of humor in Jewish tradition. So I decided to, that sermon for Mother's Day that I gave, I opened with a joke. So here's the joke. It was a dull afternoon at the pool in Miami. Of course, we are all Jewish mothers in Miami. So 3 Yiddish mamas. Yiddish, it's another word to describe Jewish, Yiddish. That's a language that we use, especially Hasidic Jews who know how to speak Yiddish. And Hasidic Jews don't want to speak in Hebrew because the Hebrew is a language that is holy, that only can be used for the time when the Messiah comes. Yeah, we're still waiting for the Messiah, we Jews. You guys are lucky. You already have an experience, at least once. So those 3 women decided to liven things up a little bit by boasting about their sons. Each tried to outdo the others in their exaggerated praise. Well, let me tell you about my Theodore, began the first. What a son. Every week he goes out with a different woman. You think that's something? My Henry is now in love, and not just with anyone, with a woman surgeon. Amid woos and ahs, the 3rd one spoke up. So what, she said. No questions, you both have nice boys who like nice girls. But my Seymour and me, we have a relationship. Every week he goes to a man and pays him $95 an hour. And for what? Just so he can lay down on a couch and talk. But who is he talking about at such fancy prices? My sermon. Me. Okay. It's just, please remember, I have a Jewish mother and I love my mother, and my wife, may her memory be a blessing, was an amazing mother. So this is just to light up a little bit around Mother's Day. So a mother, the source of our admiration, 2nd paragraph, and the source of all our psychological neuroses. She, the mother, has been called possessive, over-involved, over-identified with her husband and children, guilt-ridden and guilt-producing. She has been blamed as the root of all our adult problems. Because of her smothering love, we claim we are impotent, unable to have healthy relationships, unable to compete or excel, unable to fail, or be independent, or be attached. She seems a shrill irritation to us. We laugh and sneer at her and her mink, sitting at the pool in Miami, quelling over us. Quelling is a wonderful Jewish word. Quelling is someone who talks all the time about us. Quelling. Quelling is when she talks about us and, oh my God, there's such a smile on her face. I'm trying to translate what quelling is. Actually, there is no exact translation. On Mother's Day weekend, we make a national fuss over her. We try to appease her with a day all her own, a day on which we deem her more than acceptable, even lovable. Flowers and candies we lay on the sacrificial altar. of our own ambivalent feelings for her. A guilt offering with ourselves as a high priests. Schmaltz. Now that's another word I need to explain. You know what schmaltz is? Okay, everyone knows what schmaltz is? There,
No, do not.
no, okay, so I asked people from the class to explain what schmaltz is. Come on, Gail. Unmute yourself, explain what schmaltz is.
Well, Kyle tells me schmaltz is chicken fat rendered, but I know that you're not meaning that right now. Schmaltz is like over sentimental, sappy thing.
Yeah, but it's also the chicken fat that you put extra in the chicken soup. That's why everyone becomes healthy from the chicken soup.
Yeah. And my German grandparents used that in both definitions frequently.
And there is definitely a restaurant in New York where there are bottles of schmaltz on the table instead of ketchup. And then you can just pour schmaltz. I forgot the name of the restaurant. Oh, I know now. Romanian. It's called Romanian. And it's very schmaltzy place. We will celebrate her. We will hope she forgives our little inequities. We will bring her nostalgic cards and pictures the kids drew, and we will love her very much. But on Monday, we will be simmer on the couch again, seemingly innocently talking about the woman who birthed us and nurtured us and sustained us. So that's a little bit of getting a flavor of what a Jewish mother receives from us on Mother's Day. Author Erica Danin writes, two ways to know the Jewish mother.
About Jewish mothers now. I don't know whether he talked about fathers earlier or not.
No. I'm not talking about fathers. Please try to mute your voice because we can all hear it and enjoy it. So if you
Pat
want to,
Smith, Pat
I'm
Smith,
sorry.
you
Yeah.
need to mute. So
Okay.
that,
Okay, sorry.
no, you can be on video, just mute.
Oh,
So it's the microphone. There you go. You can come back on the video if you want.
yeah, please. We need to see you.
Thanks, Pat.
So
There you go.
this is a quotation from a writer. She writes, too well we know the Jewish mother our writers have given us, the all-engulfing nurturer who devours the very soul with every spoonful of hot chicken soup she gives, with every shake, what is this? I can see.
Shaker full of salt.
Shaker full of salt contains a curse. Too well we know the feeder whose hard ranch offerings are imbued with poison. Wow. So, there are so many jokes about therapists and Jewish mothers and people laying on a couch. It's something we adore, we love, but there is a lot of jokes about her. There are books and books about Jewish mothers. The very words Jewish mother, I'm on the second page. The very words Jewish mother seem to conjure up double-edged images, a love-hate mixture of wistful memories and downright hostility. She is at one moment a hardworking balabuste in apron. You know what the word balabuste means? The head of the house, balabuste, the one that knows how to do everything. A balabuste in apron, making the house shine for Shabbat, turning a few potatoes and water into a meal fit for a king. The one who band-aids our wounds and kisses away our tears. But the next moment she is Sophie Portnoy, Philip Roth's gift to the Jewish world. An obscenity we are supposed to find funny, a caricature of both Judaism and womanhood. Hopefully everyone read Sophie's Portnoy, Philip Roth book. Are you familiar with Philip Roth book? It's a great book to read. A Jewish man with his parents alive, Alex Portnoy, whines to his psychiatrist, is half the time a helpless infant. Listen, come to my aid, he says. Free me from the role I play of the smothered son in a Jewish joke. Portnoy's complaint and Freud's science. Blame it on the mother. How many mothers you had that fits that picture? The Jewish women in the class raised their hand immediately. So tell me some stories about mothers. Come on, Sandy, Gail, who else? Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Oh, my mother was a balabusta, and she was one that could take a few potatoes and some water and turn it into a meal fit for a king. And
and that'll be in the last minute before Shabbos.
yes, yeah, she was that woman, and so passed some of it on to me, I think, because the over nurturing. And I always say to Kyle that book, The Five Love Languages, that feeding people is my love language. And so I think I got that from my mother.
And it's never fitting people, it's fitting the entire world. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. It's like, oh, you're too thin, eat some more.
And of course, it will come with a line about Biafra, children in Biafra that don't have anything to eat. And of course, you have to really clean the plate that she gave you. Yes, Sandy.
So my mother, Florence, may her memory always be for a blessing, was also that, but she was also, she was the beginning of the ability for those of us who grew up with a Jewish mother, and her mother, she grew up in New York, and her mother, talk about balabusta, my grandma Rose, made bathroom gin during the Depression and put my mother in the bathtub so they wouldn't come in, and so when they came to knock on the door. And she also ran a bakery. So there are all kinds of things about my mother. She was also she was a daughter of 5 boys, and girls growing up during that period of time were not given a lot of support to really, during that period of time in New York, to really be who they wanted to be. She wanted to be a nurse, but she turned out to be this amazing woman who could do anything. She could take a small space and create every nook and cranny so that you could work in it. But what my mother did, I wanted to share this, because those of us who have Jewish motherness in our DNA, my mother began the process of saying, yes, I'm a Jewish mother, but you have the right to be your own person. However, you really need to make sure you run it by me first. You should make sure that I'm checking this out with you. So she knew, she kind of said, I'm going to do that. So that's where what happened with me was that what I call the scrambled eggs routine or syndrome, which you go to Freud, you go to the psychiatrist for, which is you always had a number of choices with a Jewish mother. She would ask you what you want, and then she would say, are you sure? Well, I have bagels and I have lox. Are you sure you want for breakfast? You want eggs? Well, maybe let me put some bread and toast and bagels down too, just in case. So she would run all the decisions by, all the options by, and then she would say, are you sure? So the message was you could never make a decision by yourself because your mother had to make it for you. So that can be seen in everything. I say this with great love because my mother tried really hard not to do that. But so what she passed on to me, because I do exactly the same thing, But I get to say to my kids, oh my God, I'm scrambled eggsing you. Go to your therapist and talk about it. That's what my mother did. So she passed that on. And I think that greatest gift of the Jewish mother syndrome, because I believe if each one of the people on this were to think about their mothers, they would have similar kinds of reactions to that. But as we grow and all of us go through our processes of trying really hard to separate from our mothers, which you never do, but we learn to embrace what that was, and little by little, the real wisdom comes through, and the other schmaltz shtick stuff, the stuff that is just in the DNA that is not helpful.
Yeah,
Does
wonderful.
that make sense?
Thank you for sharing. I remember my mother, we had a fish in the bathtub on Friday. So she will get the fish Friday morning and put it to make sure it stays fresh with water. So when we came to take a bath or a shower, we had to move the fish to another place so the fish can continue being alive. And then what about, I have memories of plastic. So the living room, because there were furnitures, during the week, it was covered with plastic to make sure that she preserved the furnitures. And then on Friday for Shabbat, she will remove the plastic so we can sit finally after a whole week on those furnitures and feel special. A lot of interesting memories. People can, by the way, come to the conversation and describe to us your mother. Please, you're invited. This sermon is written with great love about mothers, and there is no intention on my part to ridicule or to make fun of them, but I had to produce something that will solicit some kind of a conversation. Any other memories? Yes, Gail.
No, I was just scratching my head. I didn't have something, but it's interesting. My mother's yard site is this week. 35 years ago, she passed away. And Jewish tradition, on the anniversary, you light a candle in their memory and say certain prayers. And so I've been her a lot.
I'm saying there's no coincidence. Maybe this sermon is purposefully in her honor.
I think
Marilyn,
so.
did you have an idea? Marilyn, did you have a conversation?
Well, I just wanted to say that my mother, tended a farm home, did so many different things, including milking cows early on with all of us. We all learned how to milk cows by hand. She always had a table ready for whomever showed up, because my dad was so, anybody stopped by the farm, neighbors, salesmen, I don't know, they ended up at our table. And so sometimes, of course, she'd open another jar of beets that she'd canned, or slice more tomatoes, or get more food on the table. And then she'd say to us girls, there's not enough chicken to go around, so just have an extra piece, just have your vegetables and a piece of gravy bread.
That is such a Jewish mother.
Maybe we'll discover at the end of the conversation that all mothers are Jewish.
Yeah, I think so.
I have another story. I used to take groups of kids to Israel for 2 weeks, and it gave me a chance to, while I was going to Israel, to see my mother. So one day I called her and I said, I'm going to stop the bus with the kids in front of our house, and expect, please, all those kids come to the house. To my great surprise, she baked few cakes. And when I stopped the bus with all those kids, every one of them got a piece of delicious cake on a plate. Not a plastic plate, not a paper plate, a real plate. And I'm convinced until today that some kids remain in the house and I never had them back in the bus because they just loved the welcoming on the part of my mother. But there was never a problem of feeding anyone. There was always more than anyone needed, and then it will disappear because all of us enjoy that food. Okay, I'm continuing now.
Can I share one really quick thing?
Please.
I have the blessing of my mother, who was, our family home was the gathering place. People came, and when I was growing up, and people would gather, and my mother being the matriarch and also the Balbuster, in the family, everybody gathered at her place for holidays. But my mother-in-law, whose memory should be a blessing, was the same. And my husband grew up in Omaha on a farm, and it's the same value. It was the same process. It was open, there was food, there was always something, somebody would stop by, there was coffee, there was always something. And it was a place to gather around that value of family and connecting with your community.
I think it also prevented us growing up to be in places that she didn't want us to be. By opening the houses and making it welcoming everyone, that was a great way to keep us safe. I'm going now in the middle of the page 2. So this year, in honor of Mother's Day, I, a rabbi, a Jew, a son, a brother, and a husband, proposed to announce to the Jewish community that the joke is no longer amusing. It mocks us, it taunts us, and it jests at our pain and our love and our giving. As girls grow up, it robs them of their natural role model, for they know that to marry and love and have children is praiseworthy, and they are taught that the family is central in Judaism. The mother is the queen of a peaceful Jewish home. Yet, who are they supposed to emulate publicly and proudly? So this was a time that I got sick of some of the Jewish jokes about mothers. So I wanted to offer maybe a different kind of a sermon that is less painful by telling all those jokes. Although I wrote all this with great love to mothers, I still felt that there is an issue here that we need to be careful from, and I'll explain in a second. Yet, who are they supposed to emulate? Those girls growing up. These cliches are these to be their inheritance. We know the reality of our mother's love, but then we smugly repeat these blasts at them. How many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They would rather sit in the dark and suffer. Silly, controlling, masochistic. These are the characters daughters expect to become. We are their daughters and sons. What do these supposedly comical punchlines tell us about ourselves and about the way others view us? What are we to say? We are the sons and daughters of Jewish mothers. A man once told me, look at the mother if you want to see the daughter in 20 years. It's a sneering jab at us. The Jewish mother stereotype gives birth to an even uglier inheritance, the jab stereotype. I want to explain the jab. So this is something that about 20 years, 15 years ago, there were a lot of jokes about JAP. JAP stood for Jewish American Princes. So there was a short way of putting a label on those kind of girls. The Jewish stereotype, like our mothers, our daughters are accused of being materialistic, pampered, and sexually repressed. Or the Jewish prince, he is accused of being spoiled, immature, made to believe by his mother, of course, that he is the center of the universe. Such epitaphs are driving a wedge between Jewish men and Jewish women. So once you start with the language of a Jap, a Jewish American princess, or a Jewish prince, it started creating animosity in the community. So it was important for me at that time to write a sermon that will really warn the congregation from continuing to use those words, because at the end, those words were not complimentary. Anyone wants to respond to the last paragraph? Yes. Yes, Sandy.
I was going to say that it was interesting for me growing up when those kinds of comments came in, but mostly I found that was interestingly connected to an upper class Jewish socioeconomic group. I was lower middle class. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. So all of that was associated in that respect. What I was more concerned about growing up was that it was in some way generalizations of groupings of people in that way was always dangerous. And to us, what happened for me was I couldn't understand that. I'm not privileged in the Jewish community, although because I have money, that's where, for me, that's where that came from. And I'm 72. So, as that kind of wove its way through, it became more of a statement about the way in which an upper class grouping of people worked as opposed to lower middle class. I don't know if you find that true, Rabbi, but.
Absolutely. But it sheds a light on that group of upper class that prevented us of speaking with them on a human level. We are the one that also told the jokes about them. We are the one that continue abusing that image. And so that's why it was important to give this kind of a sermon, which I remember there was a lot of reaction to this sermon because people try to say, oh, I'm not part of their game. I never told stories or jokes about Japs. Yes, Chris.
I grew up in a highly concentrated Jewish area, actually. And it was considered the wealthy area, even though we had no money. I don't know how we got there. But anyway, those jokes were prominent all over. But I in my own professional career, I see that all the time, just men to women. And it's a cultural thing. I think it is more of a classist thing, like you were saying, Sandy, that's more, if you have the privilege to be able to sit around on a psychiatrist's couch and talk about your life, then you have the privilege to blame everybody else for your problems, kind of stuff. But the people that aren't necessarily Jewish, but have their own dysfunctions in their own family, that goes across the board. I think it's not just a Judaism thing, but it's good, I think, for us Christians to remember that we do that all the time. I mean, when we talk about the Good Samaritan, it's not about being kind to your neighbor. It's about breaking down all those stupid stereotypes that you have and saying that none of those stereotypes work. I mean, who you thought was going to help didn't. I mean, those kinds of things are a shattering of cultural expectations. They're not just be nice to one another. So every religion, I think, has this own kind of breakdown of the stereotypes that draw us in and keep us apart from one another at the same time.
I have just a really quick reaction to that too, Chris.
I just want to ask Chris something. Explain to me the Good Samaritan piece that you just talked about.
Well, in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Luke, there's a story about Jesus who tells a parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Somebody has been jumped by robbers and left to die, beaten up in the side of the road. And the the people that walk by are Jewish priests, high priests who
A Levi.
elite, yeah, and they're the elite of that community. That, and he's talking to Jews. The spoken to Jews. So what he's saying is that your leaders, who you always count on to be the ones who will protect you and care for you, they're not even there. I mean, they say one thing and do something else. For other people who are expected to stop and help good neighbors, they don't. But it's the one that the Jewish community has thrown out of their community, the Samaritan Jew, is the one that actually stops and is generous and gets the person help, and then leaves money behind to make sure that they're cared for. And there's so much of, even now, I mean, we're doing that now, where we blame everything on the Trumpsters, or they blame everything on the liberals, or they blame everything on the immigrants, and you know, what's wrong with this world is that nobody stops to help anymore. Well, what's wrong with this world is that we categorize people into helpers and not helpers and all these other kinds of things. And we need to start letting go and dropping all those stereotypes of Japs, Jewish American princesses, which, you know, I grew up with several of them, right? That's where we always joke about how stereotypes are there because they save us time. But that's not true, right? We do that tongue in cheek, that stereotypes break us apart. And if we're ever going to come together, we need to stop those categories about what separates us. And that's what the Good Samaritan's about. It's not about blaming the Jews for the problems.
No, but you know, I think I'm trying to remember. I was invited once to do the invocation for a Good Samaritan award that was done in Omaha. I always resented that story because it was about the Jew that doesn't pay attention to the person that was on the ground as a result of a robbery. And that was very strange for me, that story. So I actually, in part of my invocation, or maybe benediction, I ruined it that night for all those people that expected to receive that award, a Good Samaritan award, but by trying to explain how a rabbi sees that phrase so problematic. Anyway, that was the last time I was invited to ever give that award to anyone.
I was going to say, it's interesting, especially in light of what you're saying, Chris. One of the things that we do, I think, right now, especially to try to manage everything that's going on, is to recognize that stereotype, that infighting that we can do in amongst us ourselves is okay. But have anybody else on the outside call us that, we protect ourselves, because that's a part of our identity, like it or not. Being that it's very interesting. It's sort of like, I can call my brother or my sister a Jap, but if you're not Jewish, you can't use that. And it's the same. We can use all kinds of different kinds of stereotypes for that. But I think I was going to say, but I think in order to begin to break down those barriers, we have to accept that part of our identity is that our identities are different. It does not mean that we are not connected, but to acknowledge an identity and all the things that go along with that. And then we look for the common. Then we look for the common ground. But getting rid of those stereotypes is also acknowledging that they're there for a particular reason. They serve a purpose. We just don't not quite sure what that is. And maybe it's fear, maybe it's protection, but listening to why they're there in the first place. And then doing what you said, Rabbi.
Identity that you're discovering and you're exploring. And that's an important thing. But
this
is something that you have to realize is temporary. It's something we give to ourselves. It's not something God has given us. And we don't have to live into that reality. We can be something different. Right?
But this is the level that I feel that Tri-Faith should get even deeper to where we are. Exactly. I think it's important to offer the blemishes, or whatever blemishes are we talking about, to each other. Like, it's important for you, Chris, to tell story about the Samaritan, Good Samaritan, in order for us Jews to understand what is the story there and why it was important at that time to put the story in the canon of the New Testament. This is the kind of conversation that needs to take place. And I'm not even addressing yet the Muslim community. I wonder what there is there in the Muslim community that we don't have the foggiest idea how they perceive this. That's why this opening of conversation and being able to talk about everything, even if sometimes it brings pain in the conversation, I think it's important. We're not there yet in the tri-faith. We need to get there.
Well, I think the Good Samaritan story I know is offensive to Jews, but one of the things that the Christians need to be about speaking this out in public is realizing that it is a Jew speaking to other Jews about Jews and how they separate each other from Samaritans to Levites to all those things, and that our expectations based on those stereotypes aren't necessarily true, and there are stereotypes, not God's. But because it's Christians that are telling this story and raise that up as this, we're such wonderful people because we'll stop and help. We identify with the Samaritan, right? Not the Levite. So that's where the damage is done, I think, between the faiths. And
Yeah.
to be able to talk about that seriously and say, quit identifying with the good guys. Always identify yourself and understand that you have both good and bad in you, and you're just as likely to walk away from people as to stop and help.
Beautiful.
And it could be about,
sorry. No.
Go ahead, Deb.
no, I was just gonna say, it's equally powerful about any institutionalized hierarchy. It was written in a time of Jews to Jews, but you can rewrite it and retell it with Christian clergy with exactly the same power, which is my observation on the whole conversation. I think about my grandmothers, the way Gail and Sandy described theirs, and I go, well, those are my grandmothers. And the first time I heard the term Jap was from my business partner who was Jewish, and I was offended that she was just talking to me, not in general. And then we discerned over a couple of weeks that we both shared a prejudice. It wasn't against Jewish women. It was, as Sandy said, about not just wealthy women, but women who felt very privileged and lauded it over others in our environment. And so, we labeled them junior leaguers, which was not fair either, but oh, Debbie's laughing. So anyway, I just want to say it is such commonalities, but there must be something about us listening to beautiful Jewish humor and ingraining it as a stereotype when it's pretty universal.
I just want to say my last word about the Good Samaritan. It was very important at that time for the Jewish Pharisees to make sure that people don't become Samaritans. Samaritan tried to pull Jews out of the ranks of Judaism. And so for the normative religion, it looked like a threat, looks like this is a place where we need to be careful. But this all belongs to the past, but the past needs to be interpreted in modern tools, but it still has to be explained. Yes, Chris.
For our Christians, we're dealing with that today in the wide spectrum of understanding about Christianity. I mean, I was reading an article in the Atlantic about the comeuppance of the evangelicals. And that I could say that the in Christianity for the rest of us. But at the same time, I also realized that that's just a silly stereotype, and not all evangelicals believe the same thing, which was really eye-opening from the Atlantic article. But I do know that. I know that all stereotypes are silly and that they don't really hold up, and that there are exceptions to every rule and all that kind of stuff. But I'm willing to say that, why is it that nobody is studying more detailed why white women voted for Trump. Those kinds of things we have stereotypes surrounding all those things, which has something to do with the evangelicalism, something to do with our culture, something to do. So even though we talk about how stereotypes don't hold up, there are exceptions, there are all those things, we do stuff in groups. And we, like Sandy said, that's part of our identity. We give ourselves. And so we live into that identity because we've been giving it to ourselves for so long that we think that that's who we are. And yet you aren't given permission then to walk out of that stereotypical identity and do something altogether different. And that's where I think the power needs to come in. But we need to study our culture well enough to be able to say, you know, that's true. It's true in the Spanish culture. It's true in the Lutheran Scandinavian culture. It's true, you know, it's true everywhere. So how do we break down some of those stereotypes and give people permission to walk out of those stereotypes when they no longer work for us? And that's the identity piece that I think we need to spend more time working with.
I had like many of you, such a difficulty with the phrase implorable, or constantly talking about people that did not go to college, and the whole category in the election results of dealing with people that don't go to college and talking about them in a way that was really not complimentary at all. So we need to be careful about this. Any other insights? Okay, so let's continue. The bottom of page 2. We could, on the one hand, giggle and say, well, it's true, you know, about Jewish women in general, or we could say it's not that serious, it's harmless, little banter. Or on the other hand, we could stop fooling ourselves. Page 3, we could do what Rabbi Jeff Solkin did in his excellent article in Moment magazine, and call these jokes exactly what they are: self-hating Judaism and kosher sexism. Self-hating Judaism, he says, because we imply that there is something inherent in Judaism that creates princes or guilt-grabbing mothers. Self-hating Judaism, Solkin continues, because we ourselves react the old Gentile anti-Semitism of the greedy, money-minded Jew into the bedecked, status conscious, upwardly mobile Jews. That's what Sandy suggested, how those terms came into being. Then we become defensive about ourselves. Oh, no, not me. I wouldn't be an overbearing Jewish mother. Or, oh, don't worry, I am not a Jap. We think we are laughing at ourselves, but we are simply playing a game, trying to pretend that we are not really ashamed of what we are. And ultimately, our insistence upon laughing at our mothers is not only self-hating Judaism, but socially acceptable sexism as well. It is a cliche of all that we feared in women: drive, ambition, intense emotionality, fierce loyalty, and the ability to give selfless love. So I remember the conversation in the Oneg Shabbat. So the Oneg Shabbat is after the sermon, when everyone gathers at their social hall, and we go to the chocolate dessert. And then I remember that night what happened clearly. That sermon still sounds so fresh to me, because there was a lot of confessions. A lot of men came and confessed about the way they were wrong about using some of this language. It was an incredible, very long Oneg Shabbat. Long after the cookies and the chocolate was gone, they still remained there to talk about this. Any other feedback? Any other comments? Anyone wants to say anything, or I should continue?
Sharon, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I appreciate you framing it in terms of sexism and honoring the fact that strong women aren't allowed to be strong women. There's something wrong with us in this country, be Jew or not, if we are strong women. And so I appreciate you pointing that part out. I really do.
Thank you. This is definitely something that we need to overcome, especially in lieu of the elections and the way the vice president, the new vice president-elect, was portrayed. There was a lot of sexism in the way she was defined. And sometimes it comes from women. It doesn't have always to come from men. Sometimes women are the worst enemies of other women.
I think we are our worst enemies, 100%. We're the worst to each other.
Why? Talk to me, Sharon. Talk to me a little bit more.
Question. I don't know. That's a really good question. Why are we're judgmental of each other? Definitely. I don't know. I don't know why. But we definitely. I mean, look at what Chris said earlier, that it's the white women who are voting for Trump. I think part of that is they don't accept. It's the Phyllis Schlafly. We don't accept that women can be strong in this country or the world. Maybe I don't know. I don't know why. Well, how about why look historically at what women have been oppressed historically, and so the arc is we're getting better, but we're not there yet.
And we're living into a narrative that we've been given, especially by religion. I think religion is the most harmful, especially in the Christian evangelical tradition and beyond. I mean, it's kind of all over. It's in all religions. It's not just there, but that's the one I know the best, because I kind of grew up in a very free-oriented kind of women can do anything kind of a community. But then there were some times where I went to more fundamentalist evangelical kinds of religious conditions to be in, because I followed a boyfriend there or whatever. And I went to those churches for a while, and I was told there that I had a particular role and I needed to follow that role, or somehow Jesus wouldn't love me or God wouldn't love me, and I'd end up in hell somewhere in damn fire. And not to mention that I would make the lives of all the people around me miserable. And why would I want to do that? Right? So those identity pieces are given to us by our culture, by our religion, by whatever. And to try to get out of that, like we're just talking about, we have to let go of the need to hold on to those stereotypes or those identities that we've been given by somebody else, and be able to discover and reach down inside of our own conversation with God to figure out and discern what our own identities are and what we're called to be about in this world. And giving people permission to do that, as a pastor, I got to tell you, it's the hardest damn thing out there. People will not accept that.
I think this is the strength, again, of the tri-faith, because we all come with different teachings. And I think it will be interesting when we do it in a adult education class to talk about, for example, Eve in Jewish tradition is elevated as a result. If it wasn't for her, we'll be still stuck in paradise. So the exit from paradise is considered in Judaism really not as a transgression, but as an opportunity to do something with this world. That's how the interpretation of the exit from paradise. None of us wanted to continue living in paradise. I think it's very boring there, extremely boring. There's no challenges. There's nothing to worry about. You get the food from the trees and the water from the 3 rivers that are going. Who wants to be there? Judaism offered an opportunity. You know what? You need to know that there are consequences for whatever action you take. You're allowed to take those actions, but please know that there are consequences. This is a better picture, I think, that helped me survive as a Jew. And I think by exchanging those teachings of what Christianity says about the Good Samaritan, or what Islam says about the creation story, those are all going to help us come up with some serious new interpretations of text that was always open for interpretation. Yes, Sandy.
So dovetailing onto that and Sharon, what you were saying, I think that we are at a crossroads here where not only do we delve into ourselves, but it is really important to ask the other, why do you think that? Who are you, and where did your beliefs come from? How did you get there? And really want to know without a judgment and without generalizations. So regardless of whether we think we don't understand why, just to use your example, Sharon, white women would vote for Trump, or Black women would not. It's one thing to make the statement, and then it's another to be willing to listen to the answer and really find out where not only we intersect with ourselves, but we intersect with each other, because we're not going to get anywhere unless we do that. We've been trying to do something for a very long time. We cannot label people in groupings and generalized until that just doesn't get us anywhere. It's very scary, Chris. I think that's the scariest part, is to be able to really sit down with somebody who is so diabolically opposed to what you think they are, and say, why do you think that? And that's why I sent you, there are many organizations that are doing this right now. And if you want to see how they're doing it, one is called Braver Angels. They have conversations with diabolically opposed people with facts about history. And it's fascinating, but it's being done out there. And I think that that's what we get to say. It's okay to do that. It may be not safe totally, but it's brave. And if we do it with a real humility, which is where we come from, and it comes from God, and we say that, we may find something that's really in common, and we can go forward.
Deb, you looked for ideas for what to do for the program.
Yeah, I know. I just wrote it down, Sandy. Thank you.
Yeah. No, but I think we are not brave enough to do it. I don't know why. I mean, I think we are okay now. I mean, I think none of us is going to pack the building and move to another place. Now is the time to be courageous. Now is the time to really delve into those topics. And I hope everyone is ready for this. I'm ready. I was
You've
ready.
been ready for quite a while.
Right, you're right. What, Sandy?
You're
what?
muted, Sandy. Unmute, Sandy.
Deb, I would really like to be part of that with you.
Yeah.
I would like to be part
Fun.
of whatever it is that involves that kind of conversation. And I pray that people will kind of go listen for that kind of conversation now. It's everywhere. So I will share with you, there's 17, there's 16, 19. Well, this is about the race piece. We have to be careful about the terms that we put out there.
Yeah.
Our race, can I go on for just 1 second? Or I would stop, Rabbi, because I didn't want to go forward.
Go on.
There are terms that are floating around out there. There's white supremacy, there's white privilege, there's white fragility, there's racism, there's systemic racism, there's isms everywhere. The one thing that is disturbing is something called white guilt. And we have to be really careful of all of the guilt that comes around when we think we don't know something, or we do know something, or we've done something wrong, or the cancel. There is so much information out there about the damage not listening does, and where things are moving. But we are at a crossroads. We can do this. And I think people want to do this. I don't think people want to be divided. I think people want to be together. So Deb, I want to come with you.
Yeah, no, and it really does take skill. My son has worked with this guy who writes about cultism, which he sees so much of this as being, and there are very strict guidelines on how you talk to someone in a way that really makes a difference.
I will send you
Facts and
some of my-
data aren't going to do it.
Okay, just a second.
So
Marilyn, I saw you wanted to speak. Unmute yourself. No, we can't hear you.
Turn your microphone on, Marilyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I participated in one of these groups called White Ally. And it was so interesting, run by the Malcolm X Foundation in North Omaha here. And it was, I think we were all white actually, except some of the leaders who had brought in this man from the East Coast to lead this conversation. And, you know, the first message was that you do, as so many of you have said so properly, you do have to start by listening. You can't just start by saying why you believe what you do and going on about it and thinking you're going to convince someone in that way. So being a listener was sort of he kept saying, you white people, in a joking way, you don't get what you're trying to do here. You may be our allies. You may have your heart in exactly the place we want you to have it, but you are not helping the cause at all if you are abrasive and just say what you think. You have to listen and try to find common ground. And as you said, Sandy, move on from there. So.
Wonderful. Let's continue here. I'm in the middle of the page 3. There's a book, How to Be a Jewish Mother, written by Dan Greenberg. And it tells us that guilt is a Jewish mother's main method of social control. She gets her payoffs through, though in the attention, although negative, that she receives from depressive collapses and hysterical outbursts. So we have learned, because Jewish mothers are in reality roughly twice as likely to be diagnosed and as depressed as non-Jewish, according to an article by a psychologist, Pauline Bart. It's interesting that we buy the stereotype. It is our model. It is fed to us, and we have eaten it up, learning to laugh along, to find it farcical. But underneath all of this, women wonder if they are profoundly good. In the book, Psychoanalysis and Women, I found the following citation. Being a descent model for a child in a most worthy objective, but one can become a worthwhile model for a child only if one feels oneself worthwhile. There must be some confirmation of worthiness from other people. Let me read this again. Being a decent model, for a child in a most worthy objective, but one can become a worthwhile model for a child only if one feels oneself worthwhile. There must be some confirmation of worthiness from other people. How do we foster this confirmation of worth upon Jewish mothers? How do we foster the confirmation of worth upon Jewish mothers? We turn a private relationship with all its ups and downs and intimacies and problems into a community jest alone. Yes, we should be able to laugh at ourselves, to make fun of ourselves, to even scold ourselves through humor. Yes, we should not deny that families have their own dynamics, that no mother is perfect, that all of us have psychological grievances against one of or both of our parents. But where do we draw the line? When do we say enough? It's no longer funny. Now, which is it to be? The Yiddish mama or the woman in the mink at the pool in Miami, who we mock and at whom we point the accusing finger. So how do we know where to draw the line? I mean, a little laughing on ourselves, it's okay, healthy. Maybe we should all laugh a little bit at ourselves, but there is a need to draw the line. How do we know where the line is? How do we decide where the line is? Definitely when it brings pain to people, that's where we are not allowed to go to. When you see the pain we bring upon people, we need to be careful. We need to be careful when we talk to each other in a dry faith community to make sure that we ask forgiveness and we try to understand what really grieves us. We don't ask only what makes you laugh, but also what makes you cry. That question needs to be asked.
And listen to.
And listen to.
Because I think there are people expressing how they feel in many myriads of ways throughout the world right now, and they're still not being listened to. And so the listening is a big piece. But essentially, a lot of the response I get when I try to, kind of face people with some of these issues, I get, well, that's not my intent. That's not what the purpose was. I didn't mean to do it that way. And it's like, I don't care what your intent is anymore. Your impact is that you're hurting people. And I'm telling you that you're hurting people. So stop it. Right. But you have to be that blatant about it sometimes because they think that they're doing okay and that they're doing the right thing. And they're not listening for that pain. They don't realize they're hurting people. They think it's all a joke. And that's the thing where the listening really needs to come in because they are telling you that they're in pain. We're not listening.
Yeah.
So that's a key piece, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting that I was from time to time, a group of men will draw me for a drink. First of all, because they want to see that the rabbi drinks, but also they wanted to tell really racist jokes. And if I was there, in a way, it gives them permission to tell those jokes. And when I stood up and said, I don't want to hear it, because the joke that you're telling about this kind of people was once upon a time told about Jews. Oh my God, it was like I heard them. I was never again invited. So we have those issues in our community. And when you get a clergy to witness that kind of a conversation, in a way you get permission, you get a green card to continue doing it. So the clergy too needs to stand up and draw the line on the sand and say, not on my territory, not on my time. You should not do this. It brings pain to people. Knowing that this kind of a comment on your part will maybe pull you away from those people. So, that's what you have to do. And you don't have to be a clergy to do this. You need to be a decent human being. Yeah, I have lots of stories about how people try to draw the clergy into those conversations in order to be rewarded by the clergy for telling this publicly. It makes it kosher when you tell it in front of clergy.
I grew up in the era, and maybe it's still around, where sensitivity training was all over the place. Everybody did sensitivity trainings. And I think that as we've gone through, it's so much part of the clergy, it's so much returning to those values. And it is also being able to return or go forward with maybe the simple training, a safe space where people can learn again how to listen and what that really means without feeling generally the defensive reaction that may come out. Like there's all kinds, Chris. It's not just that I felt. It's not just, oh, I didn't do that. I didn't mean that. It's that, oh my God, I feel so guilty. And then some of the things I've heard from the psychological community that I deal with is doing that to another person means they have to then take responsibility for your pain. Well, there's such a delicate dance through this, but we can do it. We really can. We can do this. We can do this dance. We can do this connection with God.
So this sermon was written in 1996. Did we improve? Oh my God. It's in 1996, there was a topic which is still here, guys. It's the same topic, different kind of covers. So I want to finish with the last page.
I have a comment if I can. I just
What do you mean? That's the purpose of this group.
okay, all right. I am not a good listener. So here, I'll tell you all right here on this Zoom that is recorded forever. And I get fired up over things at times. And so what do you do when you're having a conversation with Nazis who are saying, I saw it on YouTube, I saw it on Facebook that Jews make their wine out of the blood of children, and we're seeing a version of that right now. You know, my sister lives in Charlottesville, and when she calls me and leaves me a voicemail a few years ago that says we had to leave Temple out of the back door, and I'm home and I'm safe, and there's Nazis with guns standing out on the street marching in America. How do I can't listen to, oh, tell me why you're a good little Nazi, okay? And so there's a place where we have to draw a line. And
I agree.
To me, there's people who are perpetrating evil. When that happened and our president said they were very fine people, the number of people who should have voted for Trump this time should have been 0. And I don't care what policy he has or what reason anyone would have for voting him. The only thing that I can see is the reasons people follow him are delusional based on the lies that he says and aren't true. And so, and maybe there's 1 or 2 good things that he's done, but to outweigh his completely bankrupt moral character and all that he's perpetrated, if there's any Trump supporters here, my apologies for hurting your feelings. But I am just having a lot of trouble with, let's just sit down and sing Kumbaya and talk about it when there's a person who right now is treasonous. There's no evidence that the election has been rigged, but there's people marching in the street who are treasonous traitors saying, and they believe it because of a YouTube video or because of fake news. And so I'm really angry about that. And I don't want to sit and listen to somebody talk about how the election was stolen when it hasn't been. And it may cause a civil war and be the end of the country I love. And
Gail.
so,
I share that, Gail, but part of my question is, how do I know who that person is? I mean, anybody marching saying that the election was stolen, I figure that's a lost cause. But I don't think of the 38% or whatever it is, 36% who were supporting Trump, that all of those are, some of them just have to be, in my judgment, dumb and fearful. I mean, they're afraid. I mean, I do think the white majority is afraid that minorities are going to treat them the way they've been treating others for all these decades. And God forbid, that would be really frightening. There just has to be a way to shift some of that. They're the hardcore, no way, it's not going to happen. So I don't know. I don't feel very hopeful, but I'm willing to see what Sandy's saying and what my son is working on. And Sharon, I'm thinking of the book and the book we're reading, Isabel Wilkerson's Cast right now. And it's so, the comparisons with Nazi Germany, that really not the majority of Germans bought into Hitler, but they went along to get along. And so the people who go along to get along. We got to figure that out, but I don't know how.
Okay, I'm trying to, well, we're not going to solve everything now. I'm trying to, let's finish who would like to read the last page, the last paragraph, please? Come on. One of you should read it loud.
I'll read it.
Please, thank you.
Okay. When do we ask Don Greenberg to write a book praising the Jewish women in his life for loving him in spite of his own idiosyncrasies? When do we reject Philip Roth's own neuroses being heaped on the most convenient scapegoat and then calling it modern Jewish literature? Perhaps that should be the gift we Jewish daughters and sons give on Sunday, freeing our mothers from the stereotypes we have not only imposed upon them, but have also consciously or unconsciously aided and abetted others in perpetuating. Therefore, on this Sabbath, Erev Mother's Day, if you will, I offer this sermon as a gift to my own mother and the mothers here tonight, and to all the other mothers whom we have made the butt of our jokes, the objects of our ridicule, and the recipient of our nervous struggle to accept who we are and from where we have come. Let each return to her rightful inheritance, not of candy or cards or flowers, but of deeper respect, gentleness, admiration, and caring. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. This is, I'm sure, one of many, many conversations that we're going to be busy with. Thank you very much. Chris, thank you for arranging this.
Most welcome. We'll
Rabbi.
have new sermons up online soon, and we'll continue the conversation ongoing. For those of you that joined us a little bit later, we had this originally scheduled toward this week, but we're going to continue because one, we had to give up a week because of the weather. And now that we're on Zoom, there's no reason why we just can't continue this ongoing. As long as Rabbi has 26 years of sermons to share with us, we can have lots of really good conversations. So as we receive those sermons from him, we will put those up online and you'll be able to get those at the same place.
More than 24 years. We all have sermons inside of us that we would like to preach.
Yeah.
And so hopefully other people can write those materials too, and we can talk about this. Yes, Sandy.
Can we end with a prayer?
Please.
Yum, yum.
Baruch, Sandy loves this prayer, which is Baruch Ata Adonai Yom Yom. Blessed are you, our God, day by day. Baruch Ata Adonai Yom Yom. Every day.
Thank you, both clergy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Stay healthy, please. Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Dad.
I'll call you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Pat.